Welcome in, everyone, to Flyover Footy. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for joining us. We're going to get started with the stream here in just a few minutes, and it's going to be an interesting show tonight in typical City fashion because of how kind of weird this season is right now and weird how the things feel. It's just me tonight, so you're just going to get Matt Baker, stream of consciousness, talking for 45 minutes or so. So we'll see how that goes. I'll wait for the live stream chat to roll in. Hopefully we get some folks tuning in and commenting because y'all are going to carry me tonight a little bit. So if you're tuning in on Instagram, if you're tuning in on YouTube, thank you so much for joining me personally tonight. And joining the conversation. We'll get started in just a second. And since we're not going to do a wind down, because I, for the love of God, cannot imagine going more than 45 minutes by myself, we're going to go ahead and crack one open right now and start the festivities early with this one with a nice Schlafly Oktoberfest. It's going to be an interesting show, but a good show, I think. Plenty to talk about St. Louis City. Good evening, Phil. Thank you for joining me. Also see how long I can talk without dead air. That's going to be an interesting point tonight. If you have any feedback in chat, though, tonight's the night. Desperately searching for my chat to carry me through this one. All right. Might as well get going. Plenty to talk about, like I said, between the press conference, previewing this, and kind of just talking through what we're doing with this team right now. Such a weird spot to be in. All right. Welcome in, everyone, to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We are sponsored by Noble Ice Vineyards. My name is Matt Baker, and tonight I am joined by myself. I'm doing a solo show tonight. So if you're listening to this on podcasts, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for listening, downloading, and subscribing. If you're watching this on YouTube or one of our live stream social medias, thank you so much for tuning in. This is an interesting time to be a St. Louis City fan. It's one of the most unique time frames to follow this club since its inception. I mean, if you follow this entire path of the club so far, it's been an uphill climb. Yeah, there have been bumps in the road here and there. The unceremonious dumping from the playoffs last year is one thing, but this right now, the moment where we are on the precipice of being mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, it's something that we haven't experienced yet. So yeah, we've got a whole lot of just different ways to view things. And that's kind of what this whole show is about right now. Since I'm here by myself, unfortunately, Phil is out of the country. Santi is occupied. Stu is knee deep in supporter activities that I can promise you is going to be worth it. Trust me. And Justin Horniker, unfortunately, was going to join me, but had, as St. Louisans do, a power outage. So couldn't make it on this show, but we'll have Justin on again soon. So you get me and you get this weird time. So we're kind of trying to figure things out as St. Louis City fans right now of you have this up and down period after Leagues Cup where things are seeming like they're in reach. You have Portland, LA Galaxy really kind of reignited everything as this team can make a run. And then New England just kind of fell apart a little bit. And you think this beautiful stretch. Yeah, Derek Smith in the chat. I really thought this team was going to go 4-0 from New England to SKC. And now we'll be glad if we can just get this one road win and call it a day in some regards. And, you've still had the SKC game as, I think, the pinnacle that we now have to work towards. But this whole thing was kind of derailed by this Minnesota United team that really played more of a low block of anything. And really, we talked about it on Fallout, so I'm not going to go into it. But that put the brakes on all of the momentum that we had. And so fast forward to this week, and you're having a press conference that I hope a lot of you watched on City's YouTube, because John Hackworth was really stuck within a rock and a hard place here. There was a lot of discussions and kind of his own stream of consciousness about how he's going through the rest of this season, what the goals are, how he's balancing everything. I'm just going to read a pretty direct quote. He had not a direct quote, but a summation of what he said in the press conference, saying he discussed thoughtfully how he was the interim coach. He's trying to earn the job full-time at this stage of the season. So right there, Hackworth's priorities are maintaining this job. That has been a discussion piece in and of itself is, does John Hackworth want this? Does the team want to give it to him? You could put to rest any thoughts of, does John Hackworth want this job as St. Louis City SC head coach? He does. He mentioned that directly right at the start of the press conference on Thursday. He's the interim coach trying to earn the job full time. And at this stage of the season, you're trying to balance a lot. You do have the whole elephant in the room of the playoffs are just on that precipice of being mathematically eliminated, still being in it. So you can't say that the season is a wash and you're playing for something entirely else. You're still playing to win, still playing to fight. And if you win on Saturday against San Jose, then you're still in it. You cannot be eliminated from the playoffs if St. Louis wins against San Jose. There are scenarios that could occur where we would be eliminated, like Minnesota winning and St. Louis losing. That would happen. But if St. Louis wins or draws, we're not going to be eliminated. So you have that aspect, but then you also have Hackworth saying he's trying to develop young players still at this stage of the season. He's trying to give minutes to folks. He's trying to bring back veterans, getting Klaus, getting Alm, Nielsen back in, all these, Henry Kessler, Chris Durkin, these players who are injured that you would think of as starting 11 caliber players and the best that City has, getting them back into the starting 11. But at the same time, you need to find minutes for up and coming promising players like Jay Reed. You ideally want to find time for guys like Jose Kojima, but that's been few and far between here recently. And so Hackworth has all of these priorities, and he noted very emphatically on Thursday the need to win this year, but also build momentum for next year. And we heard Rasmus Alm say the same thing in the press conference, that it is all about winning these games. You put to the side the bigger picture. You put to the side the conversation of the mathematics of it all, whether you need 3 points and what that has to do with Minnesota and Dallas and Austin and all these other teams. They're focused on winning these games. And so big picture, it's frustrating to see a string of games occur the way they have, but they are focused on one game at a time and doing what they need to do for this next weekend. So Hackworth saying he's not prioritizing one way or another of all of this, but he's trying to make decisions for the collective best of the group. And if you're trying to earn a job as the full-time head coach, this is a Herculean task in addition to what you've been given from the get-go. Stepping in for Bradley Carnell, being, averaging a point per game, not having any of the expectations met, and being pretty much on the precipice at that point. It was an uphill battle from the get-go. So the question is on everybody's mind as fans, like, what are our expectations? We know what the club is trying to do now. So what are our expectations and hopes for the rest of the season? I think first and foremost, you win on Saturday. Winning on Saturday does a couple of things that, while they may not directly accomplish the goal of making the playoffs, obviously, there's a lot of moral victories that come from a win on Saturday. You, first and foremost, all but ensure that you're not going to win the wooden spoon. I believe, if I had my math correct, if we beat San Jose, that possibility is entirely off the table. San Jose will secure, or at least secure the wooden spoon so St. Louis wouldn't get it. I think New England is still in play potentially, but St. Louis would secure not getting the wooden spoon. That's a moral victory. We never thought we'd be in this place. So you're kind of thinking, okay, if that's a victory, then what has happened? Guys, we've been on this whole run this season. So we're taking it as it comes right now. We're not trying to backtrack to this whole season. So that's a win. Where we stand right now on September 19th, 20th, 21st, that's a win. A loss coupled with Minnesota United eliminates us. So we're trying to do what we can to maintain this narrative as long as possible. We want to stay in it. We don't want to be the second team in all of MLS eliminated from the playoffs. That is another moral victory, because as soon as that happens, the media jumps on it. The national story is St. Louis won the conference and they were the second team eliminated from the playoffs. Avoiding that story will be massive. The West is a much stronger conference, I think, this year than it has been in previous years. So, this is all part of that narrative. But also, when you're talking about beating San Jose, you're talking about creating momentum going into Sporting KC. Not looking necessarily holistically at the entirety of the rest of the season that involves another Minnesota match and a match against LAFC. Talking about these two matches in particular, back-to-back, of San Jose and SKC, or weekends back-to-back, San Jose and then SKC. Those are two matches that I think, if you look at everything going on, must-win matches no matter what, for these moral victory reasons. And so individually on the field, I do have other thoughts on goals that St. Louis needs to be working towards to really figure things out. Because when you look back on this season, you're going to have stories, you're going to have narratives that drive the season in a negative way. And if you can end the season trying to right the ship in some of those ways, it will go to accomplish the goal that John Hackworth had for building the momentum towards 2025. Some of the biggest issues that St. Louis has had are the defensive mistakes, the individual defensive errors that all but overshine 95% of the game. And last week was a perfect example of that, where you have an own goal and you have a handball call that is the difference between 1 point at the least, but maybe the entire swing of the game, because those two things drastically changed the game. And everything that happened after that, from the formation changes to the substitutions determined, all of that was because of those two moments. So you have to buckle down in these last few games and figure out what it is that's allowing these moments to occur. Shore things up on the dead balls, shore things up on the transition defense, align your back line. And that's going to go into my personal, because I'm the only one here right now, so I get to be the one who talks about the starting 11 later. My personal choice is find a back line that you think is working consistently and stick with them. It's going to be frustrating when that back line allows some of these moments to break through, but if you're consistently getting better, then that's one thing. I'm not saying Giannis Horn and Jake Nerwinski are the answers to fullbacks, but they've played 3 games in a row together at this point. You can talk about what's going on with Thomas Totland all you want, but that's one of the big takeaways I have is it's not just Jake Nerwinski who's taking over Thomas Totland these past 3 games. It's Jake Nerwinski and Giannis Horn starting together. Horn's first 3 starts have been with Jake Nerwinski. There's something there. Fully believe that with all the center back issues that's going on, the way that the fullbacks have played together, there's something there. And a lot of the passing maps, a lot of the defensive actions really go through this. They talk through how both of these players, they stay within their lanes in their fullback areas, good 1v1 defenders on the outside, but it's when they try to get outside themselves, when Jake pushes too high, when Giannis buckles in towards the center too deep. Those kinds of things can initiate the moments. A good example of that is this past week when the handball or the own goal was scored. Jake Nerwinski was doing a high press high up the field in the attacking third. Giannis Horn was the one defending on the right side. That kind of example is exactly what I'm talking about if you prevent these individual moments, you stay within yourself, you don't get out of yourself in those individual opportunities where Jake saw a chance to push high. If that's what causes this to happen, then you gotta talk yourself out of it in the moment. You gotta fall back. You let others initiate that press. So something's going on with this fullback duo, I think. It's more than just Thomas Totland, Jake Nerwinski. But beyond just the defensive improvements, I think this weekend in particular is a good opportunity for Jake Girdwood Reich to showcase himself. Hackworth was very cautious, and I'll have some information later on what he said, but he was very cautious about expectations for JGR. But at the end of the day, you're looking at a scenario right now where Chris Durkin is injured, and he is almost assuredly not playing. And Henry Kessler, as I record this on Thursday night, only a few people, I think, really know if Henry Kessler is going to play right now, and it's all based on how he handled his final test and concussion protocol on Thursday afternoon. By the time we had the press conference, Hackworth said Kessler had one more test to go through to pass the concussion protocol, and so we have to wait and see. If Kessler's on the game day roster, he passed. If not, he didn't. Clear as that. So opportunities abound for JGR at either defensive midfield or center back positions that he's played both in. This is a player of all the ones that we've brought in who, whether it be because youth, the acclimation from Australia, the time difference, just all of those things, getting your circadian rhythm correct, all of those things have prevented him, and who's ahead of him, right? It's Durkin, it's the center backs, Kessler, Hebert, Wenzel, Yarrow, Giannis Horn, even, I suppose, who have been playing center back instead of Girdwood Reich mostly. But all of these things together have just led him to be that one player that we've acquired who we haven't really seen showcased yet. Last week, 45 minutes out of necessity was the first time, and I think we all can agree he didn't do poorly. He wasn't noteworthy, but as a center defensive mid, I don't really think you want that position to really be noteworthy on the field. I'd rather him go under the radar, doing the dirty work, being that sweeper, moving back and forth, clearing out the junk, than be noticed for being too high up the field, for instance, and allowing a fast break off or a fast break counter in a hole that you should have been at. I think JGR is one of the players I'm most excited about to see, at least this weekend. And if Durkin is out for a prolonged period of time, then over the next few games. Opportunity, and kind of a low stress opportunity, right? This is a player who's coming, and Hackworth is very clear that he doesn't want to give him too much pressure. If you're out of the playoffs and you're fighting for all these other moral victories, you're fighting for rivalry victories, you're not needing to do too much to try and have your team be successful in the table. This is about as low stress of an environment that you're going to find. And so it gives you a little more freedom, a little more flexibility as an individual player to just cut loose, do what you do out there, and just showcase yourself for the team. Other than that, the biggest thing that we need to work on in these last few games, not dropping points from winning positions. We saw the stat last week. Tom Vogert posted it to Twitter. St. Louis City leads the league, the entirety of MLS, in most points dropped from winning positions. And it's not really close. Like 25 to 22. I mean, 3 points dropped compared to Philadelphia Union, DC United, SKC. A lot of these teams, I mean, they're not good, but St. Louis City, this is part of that narrative. 25 points dropped from winning positions is the difference between right now fighting for not the wooden spoon and fighting for home field advantage in the playoffs. If we can figure out how to protect these leads, and I don't think the answer is dropping into a low block, because we've seen that not work before. It's not changing up your style philosophically in general. But that's a question that I don't have an answer to necessarily, because we've tried a few things and none of them have worked seemingly. So that's a job that Hackworth and the staff are paid to do. Figure out what it is that's causing this team to lose focus when they have winning positions. If we can see that change, if we can say, yeah, this was a problem 29 games in, but then we corrected it, and the last 5 games you see a marked difference, that's the kind of thing that gives you all the reinforcements and the positivity you need to go into 2025 saying this team figured it out, right? They had tape, they turned it around, whatever it was, we're riding that team into 2025, and we can all be happy by that turnaround. The antithesis of that, the opposite being, of course, more of the same. And you go into the offseason with more unknowns than just players. You go into an unknown of the confidence in the system. That's probably worst case scenario. So massive thing to do is not dropping points for winning positions. To do that, you have to get into winning positions. And I think St. Louis is well positioned to do that. So the other couple lineup positions, I mentioned Nerwinski and Totland, I wanted to talk about are Giannis Horn and Jay Reed. Giannis Horn, I think we understand that he has that role. He was brought in on loan for a year with options galore after that from FC Nuremberg. He was brought in specifically to be the left back, knowing that he has some versatility at center back. Jay Reed was signed to play in a time this year where we were absolutely desperate, and he earned every bit of that contract. He didn't just play himself into a contract for this year to be our 2024 left back. He played himself into the future of St. Louis City, and I think he will continue to do that. He's continuing to show value as a first choice option off the bench, especially if you need a formation change. If you need a sub for someone who's injured, or if you need a sub for somebody where you just need fresh legs and you have confidence on that left side, you send in Jay Reed. He's done and continues to do everything he needs to, but it's the same situation of sorts to Jose Kojima and Johnny Klein, where a player comes in that is expected to be of a higher quality, and so you give that player that opportunity inherently. It's a piece that Lutz brought in. Hackworth is the coach in our system to deploy the style of that sporting director, but also to utilize the players that he's given him. And so Giannis Horn is the guy right now at left back, but Jay Reed is waiting in the wings. This is less of a conversation than Totland and Nerwinski, because I think there's a more clear line in what's going on here. There's a clear line in Giannis Horn has the job. It's his until he's losing it. Nobody has noticed really a bad job being performed. He's staying in his lane on the left side. He's doing the two-way work of a modern fullback, because his defensive action markers and his passes are all coming from all over the field. He's doing what we need to do as a left back. He's just being given that opportunity at a higher level from his experience than Jay Reed, but Jay Reed's waiting in the wings. Totland and Nerwinski, there's a lot of arguments you can have on that. I prefer to look at that as strategy in conjunction with Giannis Horn. Jake Nerwinski showing that he's staying within his lane on the defensive side much more than Thomas Totland was in the pushing both ways, that right-sided fullback. But Jake Nerwinski, I don't know if it's just a coincidence with Giannis Horn. I don't think it is, but we're going to find out on Saturday, because this would make 4 games in a row with Jake Nerwinski starting. Thomas Totland's still training with the team. He doesn't seem to be in the doghouse. Admittedly, there were no questions asked at the press conference on Thursday about Thomas Totland, because I know personally, not having the opportunity to ask an unlimited number of questions, was really focused on what's the overall approach to the season, knowing that St. Louis is in this unique scenario. I was interested in Jacob Reich, those kinds of things. So until we see more on Saturday with Nerwinski and or Totland, I think we're going to find out post-game from John Hackworth, however that goes, a little bit more insight into that, hopefully. Other positions we're fighting for before we get into the Quakes preview. Center back, that's more of fighting out of injury concerns, right? I think Henry Kessler and Joachim Nilsson are the starting center back duo. With Nilsson out, it's Hebert. With Kessler out, we have yet to see. It could be Hebert and whatever that next man up, either Yarrow, Wenzel, maybe Giannis Horn with Jay Reed starting on the left. There's options, but at that point, you're talking about your legit third, fourth options. Right mid and striker is one of the more fascinating conversations to me, because I did not really, let me specify that. I did not really like what I saw this past weekend with Simon Betcher starting as the quote unquote right mid. If you look at the average positionings, if you look at where the passes came from, where the defensive actions occurred, the fluidity in the attack was one thing. You had guys all over the place. You had Klaus dropping deep in the middle. You had Simon Betcher moving up top in the center. You had Cedric Teuchert drift out to the right. Marcel Hartl was more or less over on the left, but Betcher and Klaus often operated in the same spaces. And I didn't see a whole lot of individual brilliance from Simon Betcher. He was kind of covered up at times. I didn't see a lot of free-flowing ability. So if you're going to employ that kind of thing, I think there needs to be a little more delineation and instruction guidance into positioning of those players so that you're not removing one or more in any given sequence. So that's what I want to look for as far as the Betcher-Klaus conversation. And when you have that striker right mid, now entering the conversation, Rasmus Alm. Rasmus Alm was at the press conference. He was the one player made available. And if you're looking to indications or past types of things that the club liked to do periodically, it was you make a player available at the press conference, they tend to start. Now, that doesn't always happen, just like on match day graphics on Saturdays. It's not always the player featured that starts, but sometimes it is. So does that mean that Rasmus Alm takes this right mid spot? And if so, is it Klaus or Betcher up top? I think Phil Barbie in the chat. Perfect observation. Klaus is creative and needs to be feeding Simon. I think Klaus is creative in general. And with that role, he can feed anybody. He could feed Cedric Teuchert in that second striker type of a role. Rasmus Alm streaking up from the right side. He could feed Rasmus Alm, send it back out, draw the defense wide, and Rasmus can send across or go straight to goal. There's a lot of options there with these players. It kind of goes to a goal in these last few games is figuring out what works in the attack. Like you're throwing, it kind of seems at some points like you're throwing darts at a board and just seeing what sticks, because you're having these 4 players that you like now, Klaus, Betcher, Hartl, and Teuchert. But what happens when somebody like Rasmus Alm steps in? Like, who falls? Do you stick with the winning lineup? It all depends on how successful the players are when they're given the opportunity. And I'm personally a fan of Rasmus Alm, so I would love to see him continue to be given that opportunity. I think now is a good time as we pivot. So we are Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. Let's pivot to a preview of the Earthquakes. I've somehow made it by myself 20 minutes before the preview, and this is always pulling back the curtain a little bit. The thing that I hate to do, it's push the preview too far back. But man, there's just a lot to talk about with St. Louis City in and of ourselves. And so thanks for sticking with me on that conversation. Let's pivot and look to the San Jose Earthquakes. Match 2 of 2 against the Quakes. Last match played was one of the most memorable matches of the entire season. I don't think is a stretch to say. The first match of John Hackworth as interim head coach, 2-0 win at City Park. The stats were mind-bogglingly positive given that scenario and that circumstance where you had a 3.3 XG versus a 0.3 XG in St. Louis's favor, while City had 57% possession. If you're looking at a blueprint for how this game needs to go, look no further than this last game at City Park against San Jose. There's nothing you need to do better than this, I feel. You didn't get more than 2 goals. That's fine. You had a clean sheet, and you dominated every single facet of this game. If you go back to at MLS Stat on Twitter, and you look up the game day stats for this match back in July, I believe it was, incredible. I mean, the absolute momentum that we had on that field was a field of red. It was covered in red, except for the goalkeeping position, basically, and some spots out on St. Louis's left. But it was magnificent, marvelous. You had Knut Thorsen having just a massive goals added performance. You had great performances from Johnny Klein, Edu Leuven, Jay Reed. Tim Parker had good performance. Akil Watts. I mean, you had guys step up when we were depleted and still trying to find, waiting, bridging the gap to the guys we have now. So if we could do that against San Jose with those players, riding Knut Thorsen as a striker, riding Johnny Klein, Jay Reed, Tim Parker was still here, Akil Watts, Jose Kojima, that crew is who played against the San Jose Earthquakes team. We think of who we have now versus that. Think of the opportunity that we have. Now, unfortunately, going into this, St. Louis is 13th in the West, 5-11-13 record, 28 points, 29 games, minus 15 goal differential. We know all that. We know the recent form of a loss against Minnesota United. We had a draw against Portland, a win against LA Galaxy, 2-2 draw against the Revs 2 weeks ago. All that stuff, it's in the past. Looking to San Jose, who is in the ripest of positions for us to take advantage of. 14th place in the West, a 5-21-3 record. That's 5 wins, 21 losses, and 3 draws, 18 points in 29 games, and a minus 31 goal differential. I feel like I have to be emphatic about that because it's so abysmal. They have a 3-10-1 record at home. They're tied for second with Chicago for the fewest goals scored with 36. So this is a team that is just waiting and praying for the end of the season to get here and to be put out of their misery. The thing about San Jose, though, is they haven't been awful in the past few games, and they've kind of been on the precipice of winning more so than draws or losing. A recent form, for instance, they drew Seattle midweek 2-2 away. They lost at Vancouver 2-0. They lost at Minnesota United 2-1 at home, but they beat RSL 2-0 before that. This is a team that doesn't win often, but when they do win, they somehow win against pretty good teams. Their wins this year have been against RSL, Chicago, which is not a good team, Seattle, Colorado, LAFC, and Seattle again. This team knows how to beat good teams. You can argue, is St. Louis a good team or not? I would prefer not to be too honest on that, but I think we know exactly how good of a team St. Louis has shown themselves to be so far. But San Jose has beaten better teams than St. Louis right now. So don't go into this match this weekend thinking this is a cakewalk, that St. Louis is favored by 3.5 goals, that the line is St. Louis by 3 goals. That's not what's going on here. It's a lot closer analytically under the hood than you might think, given San Jose's poor form and the fact that we shut them out last game. Going into this game, San Jose has not scored more than 2 goals in a single match since May 12th at Colorado. So they've had a massive problem scoring goals, but they haven't allowed too many. They consistently allow. They had these moments in games where they'll allow 4 or 3, but they stay in most of these games. The wins and the draws against RSL and Seattle in particular prove that they're not a team to be punched around. You know, ask anybody who's watched them play matches against LA Galaxy, LAFC, those kinds of teams. They can be dangerous, right? They don't have a lot of consistency to them at all. They've had this massive losing streaks during the year, but they can be dangerous. And their new head coach, who's taken over a lot from Luchi Gonzalez, Ian Russell, who's a longtime San Jose Earthquake guy, been with them for years and years and years, knows that organization. He's trusted to lead them for the rest of the season at least. And there's a bit of a chip on their shoulder, I think, with this one. Knowing St. Louis beat them the last time, they're not going to want to make that a sweep. They're going to want to even the odds and try to go out on the same way St. Louis is ending their season. Health, I mentioned Chris Durkin, probably out this weekend. John Hackworth said his knee's still inflamed, still dealing with that. He ran separate at training on Thursday, but wasn't with the team. Henry Kessler, if he passes concussion protocol on Thursday afternoon, he will be there. I don't know if he'll start, but because he hasn't had team training this week, but that's the key for him, passing that concussion protocol test. Marcel Hartl, doing just fine. We saw him joking around, walking with the team. I made a note of him just because he was kind of walking around separate from the team for a little bit, but nothing to note there. Joachim Nilsson, hamstring, knee issues, was a full participant in training. Hackworth said he's joined the team this week, very confident in returning to full team activities. I bet he will be questionable going into the weekend. I think he'll travel with the team, given his training and given what he was doing in training. But I would expect that he still wouldn't start. Again, there's no reason to rush him along. The storylines of this match, the familiarity. John Hackworth's first win was against this same team. Another storyline to follow in this one is San Jose's goalkeeper. One of the reasons that they have a minus 31 goal differential is they've had the absolute worst goalkeeping performance in the entire league this season. Daniel is their goalkeeper by trade, and he had hamstring surgery earlier this year. So William Yarborough, and this was the keeper against St. Louis earlier this season. William Yarborough has been their keeper for a majority of this year, and I don't like to bag on players. I don't like to dog on them too much. He has been awful, absolutely horrendous. There is a stat that we like to follow for goalkeepers. Post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed. Basically, it looks to the quality of a shot after it goes, so you look at XG, it's the quality of a shot by a player that takes into consideration where it's shot on target, as well as where the shot comes from on the field, the danger of that, minus the actual goals allowed. A higher number means that you are an above average shot stopper. This was one of the key metrics that I think allowed Roman Berkey to win the goalkeeper of the year last year, because his number here was insanely high. Tops in the league by far. But this year, William Yarborough has not only the worst in MLS, but worst by far of all keepers, no matter the minute restrictions. Even if you're a keeper who came in for 10 minutes, you allowed 3 goals, Yarborough's worse. Minus 7.7, and the worst per 90 post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed of minus 0.43. So he's basically just, by sheer quality of himself being out there, allowing almost half a goal per game, just giving it up based on his quality of shot stopping. This is a keeper that we can and should take advantage of. So later on, one of my keys is going to be volume of shots, which is a little bit of an antithesis from what I usually say, but volume of shots. San Jose coming into this, some things to know about their team. They love to attack down the right. Christian Espinoza, there's one of their right mid, right winger, the most dangerous player from a playmaking perspective, and kind of one of their most dangerous finishers. So they like to work the ball down their right side. I think this is going to be a key match for Giannis Horn in particular. If you remember the LA Galaxy game, you remember the battle that Jake Nerwinski had with Joseph Paintsil. This could be one of those games where you look for your left back, whoever it is, probably Giannis Horn, to take on Christian Espinoza down the right and see if you can neutralize him. Absolute key battle out there that you're going to need your center defensive mid to help play a part of, no matter where you're defending that individual player. John Hackworth had a funny comment on Thursday's press conference where he talked about sometimes, as he's been the coach, he's instructed players to man mark an individual player. I don't think Christian Espinoza is worthy of man marking necessarily, having one player kind of follow him and shadow him. He's not Lionel Messi, obviously, but this is the kind of thing that ran through my mind is when you have this kind of a player out there, you need to make sure he's covered at all times, whether it's telling one person that's your job or telling one person you need to be instructing other players to go watch him and get on him. Because if you leave him open and he is allowed to send crosses in or pull the defense wide, he's skilled enough that he can make things happen from the right. And pretty soon, Jeremy Ebobisse will find a goal in the mid because of it. San Jose also takes a lot of shots. They send the ball long. They attempt a lot of crosses. They will play the ball out of their back in their own half a lot, and they like the 11 that they've been running with. One of the things that St. Louis can take advantage of in this is the fact that San Jose likes to play the ball in their own half. So styles of play, we know the style of play St. Louis plays, the pressing, the direct to goal. San Jose is a pretty similar team to that. They are not just in the same realm, but right up there with St. Louis in 7th quickest in sequence time, 6th fewest passes per sequence, and the 5th fastest direct speed. Pretty similar to St. Louis with only 0.2 meters per second difference overall. I mean, they're right there in how fast they move the ball up average when they get possession. Now, how do they progress the ball up? Well, the Quakes have they average 2.1 more 10-plus passing sequences per game. So usually they're pretty quick in how they move the ball up, but they are a little more adept at, like I said, playing the ball out of the back, working the ball around. So they'll have these more passes. This is the opportunity for City. This is one of my keys of the game, is City has to focus on their high press. They took advantage of it the last time against San Jose. They can and should take advantage of it again in San Jose. The thing about this, though, is that neither team is going to want to possess this ball. San Jose averages 44.1% possession. St. Louis averaged 46.5%. This is the lowest versus the 6th lowest in all of MLS. And what we saw in the last game where St. Louis was more willing to possess the ball, I would actually like to see that quite a bit, basically because in the last game, St. Louis had 20 plus shots. And when you're having 20 overall shots, 23 shots, only 8 were on target. But one of the keys that I mentioned earlier and I alluded to is volume of shots being king in this game. Not necessarily quality, which you need to have, but focus on putting shots on target. William Yarborough will allow goals if you can pressure and pepper that goal consistently. Going to be a key. Now, average quality of shots, San Jose is pretty poor in this. There's a lot of stats that they're poor in, but St. Louis averages 3.3 more shots per 90 than San Jose, and they also average over a shot and a half on target more per game than San Jose. San Jose averages just under 1 of every 3 shots on target being a goal. St. Louis averages just under 1 of every 4 shots on target being a goal. The perspective in this is San Jose is 11th from the bottom in this. St. Louis is tied for last, but that goes again. You need to have volume in this scenario against a weak keeper, someone who will allow goals if you just give him the opportunity to let one in. Quick hits on some of the other notable highs and lows of each team. San Jose has the fewest passes into the final third in all of MLS. They do not send the ball into the final third via passing. They don't get the ball into the final third a lot. So that's one thing, is just the amount of time they spend in the final third is not a lot. St. Louis has the second most passes into the penalty area. San Jose has the 4th fewest. So you're talking about the final third versus the penalty area. St. Louis will pass the ball, spends a lot of time in that penalty area. San Jose, 4th fewest amount of passes into the penalty area. So we mitigate these moments because even if they have the fewest, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is where we need to see St. Louis be protective for the full 90 in these few moments that San Jose actually can get the ball into the final third, into the penalty area. San Jose also has the second fewest progressive passes in general. So if you're thinking about a team that moves the ball up the field in high volume, this is not San Jose. They'll dribble the ball. They'll send the ball long, like I mentioned. They'll have very few passes overall per sequence, but they're not going to build the ball from the ground. They're not going to be very mindful about building through like Jackson Ewell in the middle. That's not their style. St. Louis, one of the other areas that this battle is going to take place is on dead balls. St. Louis is 5th in MLS. San Jose is 6th in MLS in the number of corner kicks taken. This is going to be a physical match. Both of these teams are going to try and win the ball at the goal line. They're going to try to win some of these free kicks in and around the box, and they're going to try to do what they can to force chances beyond open play. That's going to be a key to watch, is how these teams manage the dead ball. St. Louis is tied in 2nd in MLS for dead ball passes that lead to a goal. This is a fun stat because it shows free kicks, corner kicks, throw-ins. St. Louis tied 2nd in MLS for dead ball passes leading to a goal. It doesn't happen regularly, but it happens more so than most of the teams. San Jose, if you look at the inverse entirely of this, is last in live ball passes that lead to a goal. So this goes along with that whole narrative of being one of the fewest goal-scoring teams in MLS. They don't do it via live balls. So they generate these dead ball chances. They generate these opportunities off free kicks, corner kicks, trying to earn a penalty. They are terrible in live ball passes that lead to a goal. Looking into where I expect the line to occur from this game, one of my favorite things to look at in general, especially as you recap a game, is the height of defensive actions. Looking at the last 3 games, trying to figure out if St. Louis is more going to be prone to high press. Because if you honestly look at John Hackworth's St. Louis City team and St. Louis City in the past few games, they have not been as prevalent of high pressers as they were under Bradley Carnell. Even Bradley Carnell was alluding to confidence and being very specific in push points. So you don't all out press, you're specific about where you push. 2024, Bradley Carnell was a little more, I would say, tempered when it comes to this, trying to get himself to change, trying to change his team's mechanics. But John Hackworth has basically said, I'm willing to settle into a mid block. Like, I'm willing to let the opposition come into midfield before we initiate our press. If you look at the average height of defensive actions the last few games for St. Louis, we're looking at 41.48 meters from goal, 44, 37, 30. And you think of a soccer pitch that's like 120 yards or so, something like that. You're talking about a third of the way near midfield in some of these games. If you look at San Jose, 46.3 was our average height of defensive actions. It was between the final third and midfield at the average. We had 30 defensive actions in San Jose's defensive half, which is one of our highest of the season. So this is a team that was willing to do that high press more often than not. And San Jose had one of their lowest lines of average height of defensive actions against St. Louis. They typically drop back. They do not press. They have no appetite. Their PPDA is pretty high in the sense of they allow actions before they take a defensive action. They allow passes before they take any defensive action. So San Jose, I would expect to drop back a little bit, try to play the turnover ball, try to generate, try to prevent chances, and then work it from the back in long balls. They're going to try the counter, but they don't progress the counter on the ground. They, in comparison to St. Louis, for instance, I mentioned 30 defensive actions in San Jose's defensive half. San Jose only had 10 in St. Louis's defensive half. This is not a team that lives on the defensive side. So expect whoever's the right back and left back, Jake Nerwinski, Giannis Horn, Thomas Tollin, expect them to live at midfield or above and consistently try to apply pressure in that regard. All right, we're almost out of time here. If you're still listening, my name is Matt Baker. Thank you for joining us on Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. I'm writing solo tonight, so let's wind this down with a couple of my keys to the game, some of the players to watch for, and a predicted starting 11. Players to watch for, let's start with them. Names to know: Amal Pellegrino, Christian Espinoza, Jeremy Abobasi, and Hernan Lopez from San Jose. These are their leading goal scorers. Amal Pellegrino is on their right side. Amal Pellegrino is on their left side. Christian Espinoza is on their right side. Jeremy Abobasi is in the middle oftentimes, and Hernan Lopez is a midfielder. So these are their leading goal scorers. Pellegrino has 7, which is he would lead St. Louis's line. That's their leading goal scorers. Assists, you're talking Amal Pellegrino leading with 7 goals. Christian Espinoza has 12 assists this season. That triples St. Louis leading assist man in Indiana Vassilev with 4. Now, when I mentioned earlier, Christian Espinoza is the one who creates just about everything for this offense, I wasn't lying. This is the guy you have to focus on. We'll say it one more time. Christian Espinoza has 12 assists for San Jose on the season compared to St. Louis' leading assist man, Indiana Vassilev, with 4. One of the stats that I really like to follow is key passes per 90. That just reinforces this. Christian Espinoza leads their team by far, and he's right alongside Marcel Hartl in key passes per 90. I just find him such a dangerous asset for San Jose that St. Louis has to shut down. My surprise stat of the night, because I figured, why not? It's not by myself. Let's have one. Expected points, or I'm sorry, expected shots. Wait a minute. Hang on. Sorry about this. Post-shot expected goals per shot leaders. Let me rewind for a second. One of my favorite stats for tonight that I'm going to pull out here is post-shot expected goals per shot. Looking at not just the quality of the shot after it's taken and where it's on target to, but per shot. Just saying, how often can you replicate that over time? And if you look at the attackers with meaningful minutes, it's actually Simon Betcher of all the St. Louis attackers who averages that best quality shot per shot and able to replicate that. Simon Betcher with 0.17, Knut Thorsson's up there, and Marcel Hartl. Cedric Teuchert's actually one of the lower players in that regard. But the point here is Amal Pellegrino is above there with Simon Betcher. So post-shot expected goals per shot. Replicable quality shots put on target in a spot on goal that should net. And that's where that stat comes into play. So Amal Pellegrino is dangerous if he gets the ball. Jeremy Abobasi right there with Simon Betcher and Knut Thorsson on the quality of their shot. Now, that's not saying that the shot's going to go in, because I can already hear folks complaining about Knut Thorsson and some of these misses and everything. Putting yourself in good positions to have those shots should go in. That's what the X is all about, the expected. Keys to the game. High pressing, press often. We have to pressure San Jose, holding their line. And our defense is really going to be put to the test on this, because if we're pressing high, then we just have to make sure we don't allow these runs. We can't have San Jose play that offside trap against us, where we think we have our back line in tow. We have one guy step back just a little bit. It allows a guy to stay on side. Suddenly they're off and running. If you're going to have a high press working consistently, fix these kinds of small mistakes. These mistakes that I mentioned at the beginning that have been ruining the 80 to 85 minute performances. If we can fix these, this is the start. You fix them here and you build momentum for the rest of the season. Volume in shots is key. You have to possess, but you find ways to generate these quick shot opportunities. We did it the last time against them with 23 shots. Volume will beat William Yarborough. Shutting down Christian Espinoza, he's their X factor. I mentioned that already. Jake Girdwood-Reich's role in this, while not an overall key to the game, because I agree with you guys in the chat that Marcel Hartl, Cedric Teuchert, best players that we have right now, ordinary opinion. I think that I might put Klaus and Betchert again together if they have better instruction on where to position themselves. But all of those players who are going to provide quality when it comes to finishing and putting goals on the board, I'm most interested to see where Jake Girdwood-Reich's role is, knowing this might be his first chance to start, how he runs up with Edu Leuven in the midfield, how he aligns with Kyle Hebert on the back line, wherever he's asked to go. It's going to be fascinating, and it's going to be one of those under-the-radar stories that I think we get to see. I'm right up against time on the Big 550 KTRS, so we've got to get out of here. Predicted starting 11, I'm going with Roman Berkey in net, Jake Nerwinski at right back, Kyle Hebert center back, Henry Kessler, I'm going to say he passes concussion protocol. They'll get him out there. Giannis Horn back at left back, Leuven and JGR at the midfield positions. We're going to go with Simon Betcher, Cedric Toyshirt, Marcel Hartl, and Klaus. Oscar in the chat asked earlier, and I just mentioned it, Klaus and Betcher together. I'd like to see it. I just want to see it work better. Have Betcher and Klaus together up top. Have Toyshirt legitimately spend most of his time out right. Do something, I think, to make your players make the most of their positioning and don't overlap. Meaningfully implement where you're going to have your players. So I just think it's going to be fascinating to watch. And yes, Oscar, I do know JGR said he was more comfortable playing center back. I think he moved to center back because of that, right? He played center back last season, all of last season for Sydney FC. This is like his new thing that he wanted to play. It's almost just out of necessity right now that we would put him at defensive midfielder. Personally, I do wonder if he's a long-term center back, but that's a conversation for another day. For now, thank you so much for joining me on Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker. And you know what? If you're listening to this on the podcast, stick around for a little bit because I'm going to stick up for a little bit of a wind down. Why not? If you're listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS, thank you so much. Enjoy the game and go City. Y'all, I feel like a psycho right now, just getting through that. I have no idea where the last 45 minutes just went. Almost kind of like blacked out. Y'all want to do a wind down? I think I can go for a wind down for just a little bit. There's a few things I'm sure I didn't get to there. One thing I do want to talk about, though, is a look at the club roster profile. So if you have any questions, drop them in a chat. I am sure I missed some, so I'll search back here in a second to see what I might have missed. All right, let's do it. Let's just jump right into it. Welcome back to the wind down with just me again, Matt Baker, with no can opening because if you were watching our live stream or checked out on YouTube, I popped the can at the beginning of the KTRS portion. There was just nothing else to do at that point. When you don't realize that you're going to do a podcast solo, and you realize it like 3 minutes before you're going to go on, you just got to fly by the seat of your pants. All right. I feel like that last little bit was just flying down there. There was a few other stats that I think I could have gotten to, but hopefully I stream of consciousness ran through and got all the points across. So I'm going to look to the chat a little bit, live stream chat. If you're listening to the podcast, hopefully this makes sense. But the one thing I do want to chat about in a second is the club roster profile. Earlier this season in May, MLS released for the first time actual roster profiles with specificity for the first time ever on international roster slots, designated player distinctions, U22s, all that stuff. So we got another one coming out in September, brand new after the transfer window. It answers a lot of questions and it gives us a reminder of sorts, at least collated into one spot, about contract lengths, which is one of the most fascinating things to think about as you're winding down a season where a lot of people are already looking towards 2025. So we're going to get into that in just a second, but I'm going to go over this one question real quick that I have from Ordinary Opinion. Thoughts on Hartl playing attacking midfield with Leuven beneath him? Kind of what we're seeing now. I mean, one thing to remember with this St. Louis City side, Hackworth or Carnell, is we don't leverage a central 10 like a central 10 attacking number 10 midfielder is usually leveraged. They always talk about a left 10 and a right 10, and this seems like it's been consistent with Hackworth. Marcel Hartl, I would love to see him as the focal point, no matter where he is on the field. I think he should be the one that the ball goes through, by and large, in the attacking third. Earlier on, I mentioned Christian Espinoza as the player that needs shut down for San Jose. Marcel Hartl is that player for St. Louis. Marcel Hartl, I think he's just shown glimpses of it, but is that guy who should be instilling fear into the opposition's eyes of what he can do on the field. There should never, and I cannot emphasize this enough, there should never, ever be a game that we go more than maybe 5 or 10 minutes and say, where is Marcel Hartle? He is so vitally important and has already shown himself to be so important to this team that he needs to be seen. He needs to be on the ball, and he needs to be the outlet for the ball. That's the fun thing, though, about Marcel Hartle, though, is a lot of the time so far right now, we've seen him on the left side. But if you look at where his actions are on the field, I posted a kind of an infographic this week on Twitter, and I just at first posted the individual passes last game against Minnesota for Hartle, Teuscher, Betcher, and Klaus. I didn't put names to him at first, and I had people guess kind of who do you think is who? And one of the players, I think the only player that every single guess got right was Marcel Hartle, because his passes came from all over the field. His passes were delivered to all over the field. This is a player that you might say in the lineup is on the left side, just in the same way that you saw Simon Betcher listed on the right side last game. But he does so much work all over the field that it's almost wasted breath to say, all right, well, let's start him in the middle versus the left because of what he does. But I think ultimately the reason that he does this is just the context of the system. If you have Giannis Horn on the left-hand side, who does work the entirety basically touchline to touchline, then you need to have Hartle play a slightly different position. He's not an out-and-out left winger like Salio often did, where he's taking the ball, or Sam even did at times, taking the ball to that far left corner near the touchline. That's not the kind of player Marcel Hartle is. He mostly lives in the channels. And I think that's where he's so dangerous. If you can have a complementary player on the right get of that quality, whether it's Alm, Teuscher, Betcher, whoever, that's massive for the danger posed on both sides of the field. But ultimately, the left channel is a seriously significant portion of the field for us. So I view the value he has in his positioning right now as no different, really, than a traditional number 10 attacking midfielder based on how our system works. I think that if you're going to have Klaus and Betcher on the field at the same time, not to spend too much time on this because I think I touched on it a little bit, but it's just figuring out whose role is where. I don't like I liked at first the fluidity that I saw in the attack where you're having just guys be comfortable all over the place. But ultimately, I think that just led to too much unknowns, too much a lack of familiarity with Betcher and Klaus is a thing. They haven't played too often together. So that's another thing to watch for is, can that partnership evolve to the point where they're going to be knowing a little bit more where they are? And so that plays into this, and knowing where Cedric Teuscher is going to drift, I think also plays into it. Seemed like he was in all of the attacking, the underneath false 9-ish role and the right side, Cedric Teuscher. So cleaning that up, it's a holistic conversation, not just Klaus and Betcher. So that's me for that spot. Marcel Hartle, though, takeaway is he's kind of the man. Oscar in the chat asks, has Horn proven to be a starter? In my opinion, I think so far it's another miss on the left back. Such a small sample size. 3 games starting, basically it. I mean, he made cameo appearances before that, but when you're looking to generate something from that spot, I guess the question too has to be, what are you looking for from that left back spot? Are you looking for a shutdown left back defender? Are you looking for that left back spot to be somebody who can deliver service into the final third, somebody who can help with the press? Like, what is the specific goal of your left back? I think that's something we have to consider in this St. Louis City offense. And so far, if you look at those stats that show average defensive positions, individual passing maps, Giannis Horn has found a groove on that left side. And like I said earlier, I think he and Jake are complementing each other fairly well in movements on that side, where Giannis Horn is very much a two-way player. He has defensive actions that vary from touchline to touchline. He can move into the central part of the field, right in that center circle, but he works all over the field. And I think this is kind of where, if you remember 2023, we always talked about the asymmetrical shape. We always talked about how back then it was mostly you would have, I think it was the left back at that point, whether it was Nelson or Watts or whoever you had out there, Marcanic, complementary to Jake Nerwinski. That spot was Jake falling back as the defensive-minded right back. He really didn't push forward into the attacking half of the field much. Most of his actions occur defensively. And then you had that left spot move up. I think we're kind of trying to see the same thing here, where the last 3 games, that is intentional. It's not Jake is the best right back, modern fullback, two-way player that we have. I don't think anybody would make that argument. I think one of the reasons Jake Nerwinski is finding himself in this role is how he complements Giannis Horn. And not to beat a dead horse from what I said about 30 minutes ago, but it plays together. Like if you're going to look at the success of Giannis Horn, you have to look at where other players are on the field and what he's been tasked to do. He has been pretty willing to take challenges. I think he almost, Winner 83 notes he's already gotten 3 yellows. He almost had a 4th one that he tried to take on Yeboah against Minnesota that ended up leading to the Jay Reed own goal. He tried to foul him. That wasn't a winning slide tackle. That was I think I'm the last man back. I'm just going to take you out, a professional foul, and he whiffed. That could be a knock against him, sure, is the quality of that attempted challenge where he just missed and that ended up costing us a goal. So I'm with you on that point. But I do think that 3 games is not quite enough to write somebody off entirely, even if you don't exactly like what you're seeing so far. And part of that does have to do with what the option is on the right side and what you're tasking him to do. Giannis Horn's expectations is all around. Yes, Oscar's totally right in the chat. His expectations are that he's a two-way player, that he will play and cover his defensive roles just as well as he will generate offense in the final third. That's what you can expect from him. And so when you watch number 38 on the field, watch to see where he goes off the ball just as much as anything. Try to keep an eye out for where his positioning is and where he's involving himself in the press. One of the keys to him is going to be off the ball. So where does he start with his positioning in the press? So how does he follow those in front of him? That's going to be that's fascinating to watch. And it's plays into the whole, is Giannis Horn a successful left back or not? So excited for that. Okay, let's check out this club profile a little bit because this is not going to be the longest wind down. Almost forgot the term. It's not going to be the longest wind down in the world, but I wanted to talk through the club profile because I know I'm going to try to make this friendly for podcasters and those who are watching. So I'm not going to really display the image or anything, but there's a couple takeaways that I have from this club profile. We have a more full roster than we ever had. We're also sitting pretty when it comes to our international slots. We have a couple players. We have 12 total players that are international players, quote unquote, that would occupy international slots if they were on our active roster. 12 players. 2 of those are unavailable players in Jabulu Blom and in Selmer Pedro. Blom is on loan and Pedro is forever on loan to City 2. He's not coming back. So we're down to 10 international players that would take up our roster slots, and we have 10 international slots. So it works out just fine for this season. Of those, one of them, Tomas Ostrak, is on a season-ending injury, but he just got his green card. That's we talked about that a little while ago. Is after he was hurt, he went back to Czechia, sorry, and he got his green card. And so that's going to be beneficial to St. Louis for next year because as it stands right now, Jabulu Blum is going to be on loan. Pedro's not going to be a factor. Ostrak will have his green card. That's 9 current international players. And each season you start with 8. And so we'll have to acquire 1 at present time. Now, there's no telling if somebody else doesn't get their green card necessarily. The list, if you're wondering, is Rasmus Alm, Roman Berkey, Jake Girdwood Reich, Marcel Hartl, Giannis Horn, Jose Kojima, Klaus, Cedric Toyshert, and Nukvi Thorson. That's the 9 players right there that would occupy international slots for next season. Jose Kojima, a lot of people asked about him. He basically had like a school visa type thing for Wake Forest. He has been living here for a while, IMG Academy, all those things. So he was here as a youth. That's very different than having a green card. I will not pretend to be an expert on immigration policies, but I do know that as a kid, it's very different. So he occupies an international slot as well. The obvious joke that Oscar hit on is which German player from the 2 Bundesliga will we bring in to require another international slot? I don't know. You could probably have some pretty good odds that it might be one of those kinds of players. Sure. We definitely have an MO going on right now. Designated players are Roman Berkey, Marcel Hartl, and Joao Klaus. No surprises there. The one fun thing about this season that we can now talk about is that MLS has two different roster makeups that they basically sign up for. Like you have to sign up to say, I'm following the designated player model or I'm following the U22 model. Biggest differences being the DP model has 3 DP slots and 3 U22 slots. The U22 model has 2 DP slots, 4 U22 slots, and $2 million in GAM. So we opted for the DP slot this year. Next year, spoiler alert for the offseason conversations, one of the fun things we'll talk about is whether we should go to the U22 model. Talk about that in depth in the offseason because there's a strong argument to be made, not just for the flexibility to have a new U22 player, but because it will make financial sense to buy Berkey down and actually get that extra GAM. U22 players right now, though, Chris Durkin, Jake Girdwood-Reich. Girdwood-Reich makes sense. He's 19. Well, I think he's 20. Hackworth keeps saying he's 19, but I think he's 20. Had a birthday in May, if I recall. Chris Durkin is 24 years old on a U22 contract, which Chris Durkin is the beauty of the U22 contract. Let me just say that. A lot of questions about how is he still under this. U22 contracts are a thing of beauty in MLS. You have to sign them as your first contract in MLS, and you have to sign them before your age 22 season. So it's an under 22 contract. The contract can be valid until your age 25 season. So that would be Durkin's season next year if we pick up his option. So Durkin, incredibly valuable beyond age 22, but that's just how these work. And the U22 slots hit your salary budget charge at a massively cost-effective level. They only cost $150,000 and $200,000 respectively for JGR and Durkin against our salary, even though they're both making well in excess of that. We have unavailable players in Jabulu Blom, Miguel Perez, and Selmer Pedro, all on loans, and we have season-ending injuries to Ostrak and Celio Pompeu. Of the players on this roster, you can see a straight line to the core of the team for the next 1, 2, 3, almost 4 years. You have 3 players under club control through 2028. You have 11 players under club control through 2027, and you have 13 players under club control through 2026. And when I say under club control, I mean either their actual contract goes through that year or their option, they have an option for that year. Chris Durkin is one of these players whose contract is up now, but he has options for 2025 and 2026 that can be picked up. There will be considerations, I believe, regarding his U22 status that we have to think through on picking those up, but that's an example of somebody who showed up on the free agency list. If he's let go, he'll be a free agent because he's had years of service and an age that qualifies, but he's under club control through 2026. So if you look at all those players, 3, 11, and 13, you're looking at through 2026, St. Louis has 27 players under club control. 27 of a possible 30 roster slots are under club control. So there's this club can choose what to do with their roster at this point. They can, if it's not working, they can trade, loan, sell, whatever, but they've got their guys. And so when Lutz walked out of this summer transfer window saying, I have my core, we'll have 1 or 2 more signings in the offseason, but this is it. He's serious. He's built this roster to last. And so you have massive pieces like Rasmus Alm has an option for 2026. Simon Betcher has an option through 2027 if we were to pick up his loan. You have Kyle Hebert with an option through 2027. Marcel Hartl, option through 2028. Jake Girdwood-Reich, option through 2028. You have a lot of players like Celio Pompeu, option through 2027. A lot of players on our supplemental roster, Kajima, Klein, Jay Reed, Akil Watts, Michael Wenzel, all with options through 2027, 2026. Massive ability to let these players showcase themselves. And then if they're showing up and you feel valuable, if you feel they are valuable, then you pick up their options. The club is in a good position to be choosy with these players at this point. Henry Kessler, option through 2026. Klaus, option through 2026. Now, I did mention 27 players, so you do have the other side of the coin where Roman Berkey's contract goes through 2025 and he does not have an option. Selmer Pedro's contract goes through 2025 with no option. And that's basically it. I mean, everybody else has at least an option. Ben Lunt was the other one, option through 2025. And same thing with Jake Nerwinski, option through 2025. Everybody else, 2026 and beyond. So St. Louis is set up pretty well. All right, folks, I think that's about it. Oscar asked, would I keep Kajima or send him to get playing time somewhere else? Last month seemed like there's no spot for him. I mean, as of right now, I think he's going to continue playing for City 2, which I haven't even touched on, but City 2, I mean, a standing ovation for those guys. Absolutely crushing it. And the increased firepower with Kojima and Klein back down there is just, yeah, you couldn't ask for more if you were, if you're a City 2 fan. I mean, this is Bobby Murphy's dream is coming true from this group. You're seeing successfully signing contracts. You're seeing City players get City 2 minutes. It's exactly what City 2 was meant to do. Develop, be an opportunity for City players to find minutes when they need it. Jake Nerwinski, there's no coincidence that he found time with City 2, and now he's a regular on City for at least a few games. Like, that's how this works. Jose Kojima has all the talent in the world. I think he will remain with the club for the rest of the season. All options are on the table. I mean, it depends, honestly, on how health and depth go at the beginning of the season. But the problem is with sending out guys on loans are with Sam Adeniran at the beginning of last season. That's a perfect example. Sam went out on loan, Klaus got hurt, and suddenly you had Nico Gioacchini as your striker. When Sam wasn't getting minutes before that, and the loan was facilitated to get him minutes, but then all of a sudden we needed him. And it was a scenario where you didn't know how long Klaus was going to be out. And if you recall him, his loan is done. You can't send him back and forth. It's the same thing with Kojima. And Perez had a lot more, I think there was a lot more design that he wasn't going to see minutes. There were too many people in front of him. He had too much to learn. Kojima, I just don't think you want to lose that option, because even this weekend, honestly, this weekend, there's a conversation, a genuine conversation. If Kessler and Durkin are both out, one of my top 2 or 3 options would probably be Kojima at midfield and JGR at center back. That's not any worse or less quality to me than if you're having JGR at midfield and Michael Wenzel at center back. We know Kojima can play this role. Center mid is, of all the positions he's played, center mid is where it all started for him, I think. So getting him back into that position that's something he has an opportunity to do because of 2 injuries. And City is just always teetering on the edge of these injuries. So that's the value of keeping Kojima around beyond, you don't want to necessarily lose him for too long with a loan like that. But I just think the club is very mindful of his development. If you follow him on Twitter, if you don't follow him on Twitter, first of all, do follow him on Twitter. Jose Kojima he'll break out these masterclasses of being a student of the game. He'll retweet just the most audacious essays written about the most specific topic. I mean, I've got Jose Kojima's tweets on alert because I want to know the type of content that he puts out there all the time. His mind is sharp as a tack. He's the guy who we were joking earlier this season about just being a shadow of the coaching staff, sitting in the coach's room while they have their meetings. That's a guy who you're not going to lose. You're going to focus on doing the best for him. And I think they're mindful of that. So I tend to trust what the club's doing with him in that regard. Do want to see more of him. I would bet that if Kessler can't go, whether or not he starts, he's a candidate for the matchday roster this weekend. Absolutely. All right, guys, I think we're going to get out of here. Thanks for sticking with me on the wind down. Thank you for joining me on this week's Flyover Footy. Enjoy the game this weekend. It's a late one. And if you've stuck around this long, I will tease. And, I've done this by myself now, so I know I can do it. We're going to do a post-game fallout after the San Jose match. It might be 10, 15, 20 minutes after the game. I think it might be after the presser. Right now, it's going to be Phil, Santi, and myself. We're going to see what we can come up with, but Sunday is an absolute nightmare for all of us as far as scheduling goes. So we're just going to jump into this for our first post-match fallout of all time. And we're going to see how it goes. It's going to be Fallout After Dark, up late. Hopefully you tune in. If not, it'll be available obviously on pods and on YouTube after that. But should be an interesting thing. Knee-jerk reactions galore. We'll see how much we can bring stats into this, but it will be a fascinating look at a game that we don't usually get to present this perspective on. So stick with us. I think it'll be fun. Thank you all for joining us on Flyover Footy. Thank you for joining me on Flyover Footy. I appreciate you so much for listening to my voice for, at this point, I think I've gone for over an hour. So appreciate y'all. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later. Nah, Chris, I'm one of us will probably fall asleep, honestly, after trying to do that. Because that's what match will end around 11:30, presser a little bit after that. We probably won't even go live until 11:50 midnight. This will be Santi and I always tell each other before we do Fallout, we're going to keep this one to 30 minutes. We're going to keep this one to 40 minutes. There's no possible way we can talk that much about this match. And knowing us, we'll probably be up till 2 a.m. on Saturday night talking about some match. Hopefully we're in a good mood though. That's all I can say. Yeah. Thanks everybody for sticking with me on this. Had no idea I would be doing this solo. Kind of enjoyed it. It's kind of neat. Hopefully I didn't have too many ums or uhs going on there trying to figure out the breaks and everything, but I just appreciate you. Thank you so much. Let me know thoughts on this. And on Saturday, when we get our lineup out, I will have a consensus lineup from the fellas. Let us know what your feedback is, because it's going to be a guesswork on, can Kessler make it? Durkin's probably out. So if I were a betting man, I'd leave him off my lineup, and anybody can go anywhere. JGR could slot in a few spots. We could see a lot of different attacks. I'm excited to see the variance in this potential starting 11 that everybody throws out. So have a good Thursday night, everybody. Have a good week.